Every month for the past several years, I've ordered a double dose of hormones and testosterone blockers. I save all the extra pills for my best friends, my closest lovers, and my worst enemies. I just hope these little pills can bring some joy into their lives. I have the opportunity to give life-saving medication to people who need it, and it basically costs me nothing. A few months ago, I posted on Instagram asking for testosterone for a friend who actually already had a prescription. His doctor was out of town and he couldn't get a new one. Within hours, my story was taken down and I received a warning by the administrators. Now, of course, I know it's against Instagram rules to share substances, and I wasn't particularly surprised that it was removed. But I was still upset. So yeah, I know it's illegal, duh. So was changing my social security to female without medical treatment. So was crossing the street outside my apartment instead of using the crosswalk.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to this Piers Morgan Uncensored panel interview. So they talk about the issue of transgender people in women's sports. And I found it fascinating when you hear certain activists speak. It's as clear as day when the person has never a day in their life competed in sports. Not on any serious level whatsoever. And it's important to understand that a lot of the people who are advocating for this whole thing, because there are people within the LGBTQ community who think it's not right, who think it's just gone too far, it's ridiculous, because they're using their common sense and they understand that men and women are different, no matter how somebody identifies. But the TRAs, I'm telling you, they know nothing about sports. They know nothing about competing in sports, and they are out of touch with reality. And it is with that lack of knowledge that they are pushing for something for which they know nothing about. Because really, I'm inclined to believe they don't even care about sports. They just want representation, validation, and affirming of their identities, various identities of various kinds. So we have a TRA featured on this panel interview. Eli, I believe, is the person's name. And this person, as far as I'm concerned, should not be invited onto panels and really needs to be looked into. Because not too long ago, Eli was posting on Instagram to kids saying that if you want me to send you some hormones or whatever pills, I can send them to you. I have a bunch. Offering pills to children. So this person decided that these laws are implemented in certain states are discriminating against trans kids. I don't want trans kids to exist. So I'm going to make sure they have hormones. I think Matt Walsh called the person out and said that this person needs to be investigated by the police because this is basically drug dealing to children.
All of this is illegal. It is in fact so illegal that it would be impossible for me to count all the laws that it breaks. It is illegal to share your prescription medication with anyone who it was not prescribed for. It is illegal to facilitate the exchange of other people's prescription drugs. It is illegal to ship controlled substances through the mail. It is illegal to distribute drugs across state lines. It is illegal to send them to other countries. All of these drugs are illegal for anyone who is not a doctor or pharmacist to distribute, period. And for good reason. The substances being shipped across the country by Erlick's ragtag group of drug peddlers are dangerous, potent, laden with potentially severe side effects, and they make irreversible changes to your body. In participating in this scheme, not just participating, but organizing it, Erlick has violated dozens of state laws, federal laws, and international laws, making the perp here eligible for decades in federal prison. This has been done and talked about openly on every available platform, yet up to this moment, there has been not so much as an Instagram suspension in response, much less a raid by the DEA. Why? Well, because Eli Erlick is in a privileged class, the most privileged class that has ever existed in the West. That's why the confessed drug trafficker responded so brazenly when I first started tweeting about this issue on Friday after Libs of TikTok reported on it. And I started tweeting about it and talking about it. And from Erlick, there was never any denial. Still to this point, no denial. None.
But this panel discussion I found interesting because it showed just how ignorant a lot of these TRAs are when it comes to what girls go through, when it comes to what it takes to compete in sports in the first place. Now, the interview starts off very well, actually. The whole panel are in agreement about certain aspects of Pride Month, meaning how corporations pander to people from certain communities when it comes to Pride Month. I think Esther, she even said that she got an email congratulating her for being black.
Companies always want to look good when they're not paying people enough money or when they're not doing the right
that's
thing.
a side issue. But like, look at during BLM, I was getting emails from ice cream companies telling me how proud that they are that I'm black. First of all, how did they even know that? And secondly, how is that relevant?
So we have corporations pandering to people when it comes to Pride Month, when it comes to BLM, and the whole panel agreed that it's completely fake. It's all about money and marketing. So that was interesting to see them actually agree on one particular aspect. So without further ado, let's take a look.
Than slapping a rainbow flag on some of their products and trying to sell it to markets in the US.
So actually do things.
It's not really helpful.
Right, so actually do things which can forge genuine equality and fairness for trans people, which is what we should all aspire to get, right?
Exactly.
I mean, on that point, though, given you've not been on Uncensored before, we've debated this a lot with other guests, particularly James. How do you feel, given that trans people want fairness and equality, how do you feel about the issue of trans athletes in women's sport, given that it's so obviously, to me and many other people, unfair and unequal?
Oh, here we go. Well, let's leave it to the experts. The different associations have agreed on different standards for different sports. It's all very relative. A recent study actually found that we're too harsh on trans people in sports and require too much, too long of a transition to a point where the equivalent cisgender person would be at a disadvantage. So it's complicated. It needs to be drawn out by the actual sports authorities rather than politicians or pundits.
It's complicated? No, it's not. This is something that has been known from the beginning of time. There would never be categories in sports if that was even debatable. That's why we don't have men competing in women's categories. Men have their own category. And the issue is, TRAs believe that the category doesn't need to exist just because somebody identifies as a woman. We don't need studies. We don't need the experts to decide. It has already been decided. You only need to look with your eyes. You only need to look at the times and the records that are held by women compared to that held by men. You only need to observe when you see women compete against men, like the US women's soccer team competing against under 15-year-old boys, and they lost miserably. And then they competed against older men who had retired from football, and they lost 12-0. And this study, beware of certain studies. We know that studies are usually sponsored by certain groups who want to push a certain agenda. No source was cited, just some study, which is supposed to mean what exactly?
So if a 6'5", 230-pound biological male boxer puts their hand up and says, I would like to compete in women's boxing, would you be happy with that?
There are 6'5", 300-pound cis women too. Can they not compete?
They don't have the same physiology as a biological male. They don't have the same lung capacity.
They haven't
got the same muscle mass. No, they haven't. This is the whole point of the debate, is that it's not just about taking less testosterone. You have as Caitlyn Jenner has articulated very well, you have an inbuilt superior physiological advantage over biological females.
If all you had to be was the same height as a man and the same weight as a man to be equal to him physically, then we would see more dunking in the WNBA. There are very tall women in the WNBA, but we don't see them dunking as much as the men. I mean, they've even discussed lowering the rim so that we see more dunking. I mean, every time I watch men's boxing, I hate looking at how much they weigh because some of them weigh the same as me. In some of the divisions, the lightweight divisions, by the way, not heavyweight. Some of them weigh the same as me, but I'm not going to get in the ring with them because what they weigh is pure muscle. Women can't build the same muscle that men have. They can't build muscle at the same rate and at the same level as men, unless they take PEDs. And even then, they may build more muscle than the average woman, but they're still not going to be on the same level as men when it comes to muscle building, because we have completely different bodies. Our bodies have completely different purposes.
That's the problem. Now, I want trans athletes...
Not necessarily. Estrogen... Look, estrogen absolutely wreaks havoc on our muscular systems, on our ability to perform in sports. And there's a reason that the rules are so strict, because it does greatly affect our capacity to participate.
Well, we'll disagree.
Yeah, I think this is where a lot of the backlash against the so-called trans community comes from, because we all agreed on that first point, that this is pandering and this is companies trying to make money and so on. But when people start coming to arguments about biological males competing in female sports, and by the way, notice the conversation only happens in one direction, and there's a specific reason for that. Nobody is concerned about men's sports or boys' sports. And that...
Yeah, because even the women who identify as men, they still compete in the women's categories. We have a female athlete at the moment being called the first transgender woman to be competing in athletics at the Olympics. It's a non-story on paper because it's a female competing in the women's category. Nothing to see here. But it's as clear as day that this person doesn't feel the need to compete with men in order to have one's gender affirmed. We get told all the time that males have to compete in women's sports because that's how they identify, and it's excluding them if we don't let them. But why aren't the trans men pushing to compete in the men's sports? They still want to compete with women. Nobody talks about them going through all this psychological trauma of not being allowed to compete in line with your gender identity. No one questions why that person isn't competing with the men. Because we know why that person is not competing with the men, don't we? We don't need studies. We don't need research and debates. This person is not on hormones or anything like that. Apparently, hormones aren't life-saving and crucial to the person's mental health.
That is because we're biologically different. And I just think that this is the reason why this conversation has raged on for so long. It's these type of ridiculous, frankly, demands that affect women, affect half of the population, particularly those who play sports. And that's where people just get lost. And I think that's where a lot of the backlash or resentment actually is stemming from. I think in the West, most people at this point don't really care. Go ahead.
I'm going to go. I'm the only trans person here. This isn't about sports. It's about a gateway for the right to begin banning trans people from
No. I'm not right-wing.
That's not true.
I'm not right-wing. So how do you figure that?
And all of the people who actually lean left believe that this is insanity and believe that it's gone too far. What about all those people? This is just, again, victimhood. I'm just going to put a victim narrative out there to silence people. If you think that people should stay in their correct categories, you're a bigot. That's basically what this person is saying here. And of course, nobody's saying that trans people cannot compete in sports. Just compete in the right category. Because if you are male, you do not belong in the women's category. Everybody knows that when it comes down to it. And that's what Zuby's saying. It's disingenuous. You know that biology dictates that males can't compete against women fairly. But they're still pushing this because they don't care about women and girls. As long as they get what they want and their affirmation.
No, it's
well,
not.
you
It's not
certainly
a
have right-wing views on trans folks.
I don't have right-wing views on trans folks. I just said to you, I want trans people to have fairness and equality and the same human rights as everybody else.
And even if you don't personally consider yourself on the right, it's still a gateway into banning trans people.
No, I don't want to ban trans people. I would like trans people to either compete against their own biological sex, which seems to be the easiest thing to do, or they compete in a new section altogether of trans athletes. What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
so a new separate but equal league is what you're saying.
Can I jump in here? The solution for this is very simple, and we've had the solution, as far as I know, for about a century. And this is simply to have an open sports league and a female-only sports league. A lot of what people call men's sports is not even explicitly men's sports. Anyone is allowed to participate, but because of the biological and physiological advantages men have, if you take the fastest, the strongest people in the world, the best endurance, they're all going to end up being men. That's how it's going to stack up, which is why if you want females to be able to participate in sports, you need to have a separate league because they can't compete in an
I completely agree.
And yes, if you are that good, I mean, if I was running 9.93 in the 100 meters, I think that's the record for the current high school boy. Yeah, 9.93. If I ran that, nobody would stop me from competing with the men. They wouldn't. But no woman, no woman runs that. Flojo holds the world record for 100 meters, and it's like 10 something. I don't know the exact time. It's not like there's an official rule that says that women can't compete with the men. It's just that none of them qualify to compete with the men. That's why even women who identify as men don't compete with the men, because they don't qualify. Only women's sports that is going to be affected. Categories, essentially, are there to include women. I mean, that's why we have the Paralympics, to include people with disabilities. We have categories in terms of height, size. I mean, if boxing didn't have categories, we would have no lightweight boxers. They wouldn't be able to compete. They can't compete against heavyweight boxers. They wouldn't stand a chance. But they're still good boxers. It's just they need to be in the correct category. So the categories are there. It's not to accommodate 6'5" men. It's to accommodate women, people who are of a smaller frame, people with disabilities, all the categories that allow people to participate safely, so that I don't have to compete against a 6'5" man. Well, unfortunately, they are allowing men to compete in boxing, which is just ridiculous to even think about. So all the people who have these identities, they should compete in an open category. It's very simple. They shouldn't infringe upon women's sports. They shouldn't lead to the exclusion of women and girls. Why is that okay? Why is it okay that women and girls are now being excluded? And they certainly shouldn't be in our locker rooms. I mean, come on now.
All right, so I agree. Let's move on, though, because there's another part of Pride I wanted to talk to you about. I'll start with you, James, on this. That there is a suggestion that it's jumped the shark. And the reason for that, and we've got some examples of this, in Seattle, a convoy of completely naked bike riders and roller skaters had some questioning just how family-friendly the event was. You got kids there watching this. In San Francisco, Pride had a fetish zone where a man lying in an inflatable pool of urine, where attendees were encouraged to urinate on him. Other booths featured participants getting spanked, whipped, and initiating sex acts on each other, all in public.
I mean,
if you want to actually make Pride a family thing, which many people want it to be, how can you allow that kind of stuff?
You've given me a lot to respond to there, Piers.
First of all, did you see Esther's face? So if you're justifying this by saying that there's in certain cultures, nudity is accepted in Sweden and all of this stuff, if you're justifying this by talking about Sweden, then you're basically defending the indefensible, which is a pattern I'm seeing, which is what Zuby was alluding to. This is why you're losing support, because you defend the indefensible and you double down on what you know is wrong.
I would say in Germany right now at the Euros, there are English fans walking around with their dicks out, pissing in the street. I think if you go to Sweden, there are naked people everywhere, like in saunas, and it's completely fine.
You're comparing the...
So we're going to end with them touching upon women's sports again and transgender people in women's sports. Eli doesn't have a clue about competing in sports. And this person has no idea what they're pushing for, or just doesn't care about women whatsoever. It's all about the males who want to have their identity affirmed.
On a broader level, we're not responsible for every member of our group. This is how the right latches on to our different identity categories and our different social movements to try to demonize all of us for the actions of a few that might be a little
What about
less
those who are
respectable.
not on the right, Eli, like me? I'm not on the right.
And that
I'm a liberal.
You do that to people on the right all the time.
I'm a liberal who just sees endless acts of self-harm by the trans lobby, when actually I'm with you. I want you to get fairness and equality. But I don't want you eroding other people's rights.
You keep on saying this, and yet your actions speak differently.
What actions? What actions?
I'm trying to get trans people banned from sports, comparing
I don't want to ban from
sports.
sport. Hang on.
Here we go with the lies. When did he say trans people should be banned from sports? And of course, this person is intent on having this left and right thing, pushing, oh, the right. I know I probably say the left sometimes, but still, at the end of the day, this is right and wrong.
Don't misquote me.
Animals.
I don't want trans people banned from sports. I want them to be disallowed from competing against biological women. Different thing. I want them to be able to compete in
with
sport.
people of their own gender.
Or their own sex. They should compete with people of their own sex.
I think I just saw ahead of
That is exactly the type of talking point that in 20 years we're going to be looking back at and regretting.
Really? So you think in 20 years' time in the Olympics? So to be clear then, in the Olympics, you would have just, open Olympics?
Open season.
Sex is irrelevant? Gender irrelevant? Everyone just competes against each
absolutely.
I would too.
Other? Really? So do you understand?
Well, everyone just can.
Eli, do you understand that by doing that, you literally end the Olympics? It's all over because only men would win. Do you understand that? That's why we separate them.
I don't want to take this down.
Now, hang on. I want Eli to respond. You literally are destroying the Olympics for anyone who's not a man.
Trans men as well. They currently have the option of competing according to their biological sex, but they will not have an opportunity to compete if they have to compete against men. I read a whole article where someone said that we should get rid of categories. Just get rid of them. Just like they've got rid of single-sex toilets. In schools in the UK, apparently, a lot of the bathrooms are just unisex. The whole world has to bend over backwards to affirm somebody's gender. You know who's going to suffer the most? Women. But that's okay, apparently.
Well, that's a very grandiose vision of it, but
Not really. Not really. If you look at the Times.
Sorry, women and children.
If you look at the Times and the results of men Olympians against women Olympians, you will see that in almost, I think, 98% of all the events, men are so far ahead of women on speed, on power, and everything, every other discipline. Women would never win a medal again at the Olympics if you had your way.
And it's not even just men, boys. Even the boys are ahead of the women. Not to take away from female athletes, we're just different. But even the boys who are competing at certain levels are ahead of the women. So literally, you're for the exclusion of women when you say that we should get rid of categories. You're for the exclusion of women. Just come out and say it. God forbid trans people are excluded from sports. That would be terrible. But it's okay if it happens to women. It's okay if we exclude women. Nobody wants to exclude trans people from sports. Sports is beneficial to everybody, especially to mental health, obviously physical health. Everybody should have an opportunity to participate on some level. But apparently, when women are excluded, that's okay.
Is that what you
Well,
want?
that's very sexist.
No, it's
Do you know that the
it's a
first
physical.
woman
Hang on,
to-
it's not sexist.
Do you know the first woman that
hang on, James,
swam
I'll
the
come to you.
channel?
I'll come to you.
Wow.
It is not sexist. It is a fact. It's why we separate the sexes. When Megan Rapinoe finished her career playing the soccer team, American women's soccer team, she then said that she'd be happy to see a trans woman competing in the women's team, right? Which is fine because it wouldn't take her place. But if you allowed trans women, football players, soccer players, to compete, and enough of them began to do this, there would be no biological women left in the women's national soccer team because they would be physically
Well, trans
superior.
people already have the right to do that, and you're not seeing the results that you say you would be seeing.
Yeah, but you see, you and James both have this wonderfully quaint notion that if you open up the Olympics for everyone, that women would continue to win medals. They wouldn't. They'd win nothing.
Obviously, this is complicated, Piers.
It's not complicated.
No, listen.
It's not complicated. It's why we separate them. Literally, when Megan Rapinoe's national
The
women's soccer team
conversation-
played the Dallas under 15s,
The conversation-
they lost 8-2.
The conversation-
They were under 15-year-old boys.
The first woman to swim the English Channel, the first woman to do that, beat the men's record by over 2 hours.
He slowed down. He was trying to hit on her.
Let's
How ridiculous. So in order for women to participate, they have to be exceptional, an anomaly even. But they don't have no problem with mediocre males who were not winning medals, who were not winning championships, who were not winning titles, they were not breaking records. while competing against other male athletes, they're perfectly happy for them to cross over into the women's and now start winning everything and breaking records, ruining records. Funny how that works. So a mediocre male or less than mediocre male, ranked 400 and something, can cross over into the women's and be ranked number 1. They say that's perfectly fair, but they're happy for women to be put in a situation where they'll be excluded because they don't qualify unless there's some sort of sporting marvel. Extraordinary. Once again, they want certain people, certain groups to receive special treatment. I mean, they're talking about equality and rights, equal rights. Absolute joke. This community is not only given equal rights, they're given special privileges, they're given preferential treatment. It's sexist to imply that men are stronger than women physically. That's sexist. It's sexist to acknowledge fact that sporting events are categorized because the women can't compete fairly against men. They don't stand a chance. That's sexist, even though that's just reality. But it's not sexist for men to impose themselves in women's locker rooms, to cross over into the women's category and cheat and take women's titles, women's accolades, women's scholarships even. That's not sexist. Totally disingenuous, totally clueless, and you've just shown what you're advocating for, which is to eliminate women from their own sports. Doesn't matter whether it's one transgender athlete or two. In Chicago, there's 2 transgender athletes that are well known at the moment. They are dominating the competitions, and that's only 2. The girls who have a court case going on in Connecticut, I believe it was 2 transgender athletes that they had to compete against, and it completely changed the course of their athletics careers. All it takes is one. Caitlin Clark may not be where she is today, doing what she's doing for the WNBA, if she had to compete against a transgender athlete, even if it was just one in an entire team. The female athletes who are actually advocating for males to be in their categories wouldn't be where they are today if they had to compete against males. Funny that. And that's why they will never be taken seriously. That's why they always come across as disingenuous, and they know science isn't on their side. They know this. We don't need studies. What they're asking for is for more fake studies to come out to support their ridiculous claims, so they can just manipulate people and lie to people. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Like, comment and subscribe. And God willing, I will see you in the next video.